Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players, uncover their stories, and discover what makes them tick. If you love guitar, music, and the backstory of people's lives, stick around. You're in the right place. Hi, this is Craig. Just want to let you know you can now advertise here on Everyone Loves Guitar podcast. For more information, go to everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. That's everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. Hey, everybody, this is Craig Garber. Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar. And we are with another one of my New York homies today, sort of, via Australia. We're with Ben Butler. Excellent. This guy's got great experience, and I'm going to mention this again later, but before I forget, go to YouTube if you're in front of your computer now, and just bookmark or set up Ben Butler's YouTube page, and he has got some really beautiful guitar work on there, man. It's just very pretty stuff, so I'd encourage you to check that out after you listen to the show. Anyway, Ben is a New York City-based session player, sideman, and composer. He's toured the world with, check this out, George Michael, Sting, Chris Botti, Suzanne Vega, Paula Cole, Dar Williams, and Jonathan Brooke in the East Village Opera Company. He's also played TV performances and special events backing artists like Stevie Wonder, Annie Lennox, Rod Stewart, Joss Stone, Desmond Childs, Sheryl Crow, Burt Bacharach. I love saying that name, man. Burt Bacharach. It's just like he's been around like my whole life, right?
Yeah, I know.
Herbie Hancock, Lyle Lovett, Dionne Warwick, Joan Osborne, Patty Austin, Josh Groban, Andrea Bocelli, Bono and Edge, Miley Cyrus, Jessie J, and many more. Dude, that's like more celebrities than I think I've said in 400 episodes. This is pretty badass.
It's a lot of name dropping.
That's
right
big
there.
time name dropping, man. Ben is talking to us from his castle. As a composer, his work is heard on films such as The Heights, The Insurgents, and shows on the Discovery Network. His guitar playing is heard on films like Our Souls at Night, The Greatest Showman, Zoolander No. 2, 29 Palms, and Zodiac, as well as many pop and singer-songwriter albums and cast recordings. On Broadway, he's been a member of the orchestra for Spider-Man, The Last Ship, which is music by Sting, and he's currently playing with Tina Fey's Mean Girls on Broadway. He grew up in how do you say this? Canberra, thank you. Capital of Australia.
The Australians say Canberra.
He grew up in Canberra, capital of Australia, playing guitar since the age of 8. He joined his first working band at age 15. He started taking lessons with the legendary guitarist Tommy Emmanuel a few years later. Do you know Joe Robinson?
Know of him, yeah. I don't think I've met him. But,
okay. He worked with Tommy.
Sure.
After high school, he graduated from, I'll see if I can do this straight the second line, Canberra School of Music. Is that right?
Yep.
In the jazz program, and he won Student of the Year. He then moved to Sydney and quickly began performing with some of Australia's well-known artists such as Renee Geyer, Jimmy Barnes, Richard Clapton, and members of In Excess. In 92, he relocated to the States on a scholarship to attend Berkeley College of Music in Boston, where he was a featured performer on many concerts. In 95, he left Boston to begin his career as a New York session player, sideman, and composer. His solo CD release called Truth in Guitars is available on iTunes, Amazon, and CD Baby. Man, it's my pleasure to have Ben Butler on the show. Thanks so much, man. I really appreciate your time. Oh,
thanks for having me on here. I've really enjoyed listening to a number of your episodes already. It's been really fun. Some players whose playing I love. It's been great hearing them tell their stories and talk. It's been great. Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. I don't know how anybody listens to me for that long, but God bless you and thank you. Man, I've interviewed several players who actually took lessons. I mentioned Joe. I know there's been a couple of other ones from Tommy in Australia. Yeah. This was all, like I assumed before, he kind of broke loose and got hooked up with Tina Turner in like 87, I think it was. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that he played with Tina Turner. So Tommy had a amazing career in Australia before he even moved to the States. He was legendary in Australia, like a household name type. See him on television all the time.
playing in some of the bigger bands in Australia, and then even more so as a solo artist, and also with his brother Phil Emmanuel. They were the Emmanuel brothers. They actually had a family band. I think Tommy was 4 or 6 or something, and Phil was a couple of years older than him. I mean, people who know about Tommy probably know all this stuff, but if you go and, you Google this stuff about, it's just, the stories are just amazing. They literally were traveling around the outback in Australia as a family band, playing music by like the Ventures and like the surf guitar stuff. And so he's, and he made the move many years ago back. He made the move over to, I think, London first, and then he moved to San Francisco, and then eventually to Nashville, and now he's almost a household name, certainly among guitar players.
Yeah, for sure.
Around the world. He's probably the most famous solo acoustic guitar player now. So to answer your question, yeah, I had lessons with him. I first heard him back in Australia before he left the country. I think it was around 84, something like that. And he and his brother Phil were doing a lot of gigs around Australia, like in pubs and stuff like that. Tommy would play acoustic and Phil would play electric, and they'd play a duo, and they'd play every hit guitar instrumental, from Guitar Boogie to the Shadows stuff to Al Di Meola to Santana. They would just play everything, and Chet Atkins stuff, and just dazzle people, and in the most rowdy, beer drinking pub environments, and just get people listening to them and entertained. And so I was living in Canberra, and playing in a cover band and stuff like that. And a friend of mine worked in a music store, actually a music store that Frank Gambale worked in.
That's funny.
Yeah. Because he's from the same town as me, a little bit older, went to the same high school. I didn't really know much about him at the time, but a friend of mine, I remember distinctly telling me, this guy's really good. You got to go have lessons from him. And I didn't. I was having lessons with someone else, but I didn't know, what Frank was going to wind up doing. But anyway, this music store, and one of the other guys that worked there said, you got to come and check out the Emmanuel brothers. They're playing a clinic tomorrow, or whatever it was. And I remember at 14 or 15 or something going, or maybe 16, going, the guy was like, yeah, the Emmanuel brothers are amazing. They're really great. You got to hear them. They'll blow your mind. And I was thinking, oh yeah, they're good, are they? Well, we'll see. Oh, they're good. You sure they're good? Yeah, no, trust me. So I come back for the clinic. I think they were demoing either Yamaha or Ibanez electrics, which is funny in hindsight. But anyway, they had a band. They had like a bass player and drummer, and they were doing this guitar instrumental stuff, and just tore the place up. Like, not just in their playing, in their showmanship and their comedy routines and humor and their chops, And I was just like mind blown. I'd never seen. That was the first time I saw any guitar player play live on that level. I mean, and as we know now with Tom, especially with Tommy, I mean, he's one of the great players in the world. One of the greatest guitar players in living, right? Definitely. So to see him back then, I mean, I was just a kid. Oh my God, my world has completely changed. And and after the clinic, my friend at the music store said, they're going to come in on Saturday into the store at midday. You should be there. And so I said, okay, yeah, sure. Anywhere where they're going to be, I'm going to be now. Yeah. So I came into the store, and I was sat in the corner playing a guitar and just doing my best to play my best licks and whatever. And sure enough, Tommy came in, and he's chatting or whatever. And then he comes over to me. He says, I think I was actually trying to play Mediterranean Sundance, the Al Di Meola song.
That's really like balls, man. You must but that says a lot about your confidence at that level. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
how old were you?
I think I was around 15. I think I discovered that record and Friday night in San Francisco, and I just was like, it all happened around that same time. Actually, hearing players on that of that caliber in rock and jazz and fusion and everything. Anyway, I'm sitting there doing my best to play that intro and probably doing it wrong. And Tommy comes over and he says, "Oh, let me show you how to play that right." And he grabs the guitar and plays it for me. I'm like, "Oh, like this?" He said, "Yeah." He says, "Where'd you learn to play that?" And I said, "Oh, I just figured it out." And we started chatting. He said to me, "Well, listen, if you ever come up to Sydney, give me a call and I'll give you guitar lessons for free. Just give me a call, So I just went, oh my God, that's amazing. Ended up taking me probably 2 years. I would go and see him play at more gigs. And I was just, at this point, I was just so, in awe of his playing and stuff, but I didn't have the confidence to even ask for a lesson, But I finally, at one gig, I came up and said, "Hey, Tommy, could I come over for a lesson?" He said, "Oh, I was waiting for you to ask that."
That's funny, man. It's all the shit we always have in our head of, the little voices almost telling, whispering to you, and it's just funny how all that shit happens. And most of the time it has nothing to do with fucking reality.
Yeah. So, exactly. So, so I finally had the confidence to at least, sit down for a lesson, and I started going over to, every few months. I lived in Canberra, which was back then about a 4-hour drive from Sydney. And I would get up to Sydney and I'd go and see a gig where he was playing and give him a call and maybe come around the next day for a lesson. And I still have a cassette tape of some of the stuff, from the lessons. So when I say I studied with him, I mean, I had probably, 5, 6, 7 lessons with him maybe. And after a couple of years, I moved up to Sydney, and then he would ask me to, if I came to a gig, sometimes he'd, have me sit in with him. Which was an amazing experience. And, saying that, I also have to point out that he's done this for so many young players. I mean, he's such a generous person, and he always is. He's so encouraging to musicians. And nowadays, you can look on YouTube and there's Tommy with a young guitar player in Ukraine or in China or in Japan or in Australia, whatever. And these young players, they know all the Tommy arrangements and they get up and play with them and stuff. I mean, he's so encouraging. But and we're friends today. I see him if I go to Nashville or if he plays a show in New York, and he had me come and sit in with him at BB King's a couple of years ago, which was
that's cool,
super fun. Yeah, it was. I came to see the gig, and it was hung out with him in the dressing room. He said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" I said, "No, I don't know." He said, "You want to come back to see the show again?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You want to play?" I'm not going to say no.
Yeah, that's all. That closed down though, didn't it? BB King's?
Yes.
Yeah.
It did. It
that
did.
Sucks.
Yeah, rents in New York, but I think what's the place now? Is it Sony Hall? It's also in the Times Square area. Excuse me, I'm a bit under the weather. You probably can tell. They seem to have taken on a lot of the similar acts, but yeah, it was BB King's was. It was kind of Guitar Central, really. Yeah. I mean, I saw, even the last few years, I saw Eric Johnson there, Larry Carlton, Tommy several times. I mean, there's a lot of people in that kind of world that would play there.
I think Johnny Winter had like his 70th birthday party there too, I believe.
Right. And there's the Iridium too, also in the same area, that has a lot of guitar stuff, because of the Les Paul Trio legacy. They always have guitar play. I think Steve Lukather's playing there this week, actually.
The Iridium's down in the Village, though, isn't it?
No, the Iridium's in it's in the Times Square area. I didn't know that. It's like 51st or 2nd downstairs. I forget the block exactly, but.
I don't know why I always thought I saw Les Paul. I thought it was the Iridium years ago down in the Village. It must have been, wasn't the Village?
Was it Fat Tuesdays?
Man, I don't know.
Maybe they moved it. I don't know.
It was so long ago, man. It was,
He used to play Fat Tuesdays, and that was, I saw him down there back in the 80s or something.
Yeah, that's when this was early.
Jimmy Page was in the audience.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy shit!
I got his autograph on a business card, on a Fat Tuesdays business card.
Was that weird? Was he amiable about it?
No. It was a really funny experience. So I'm sitting there this actually gets to part of the this is a good segue into kind of why I moved to New York, really. But
great.
I'm sitting there with my dad in New York, not living in New York. I was visiting New York, and my dad was working in New York for a few months, so I came over to visit. And we just went out and saw all this guitar music all the time, which was awesome. And so Les Paul's playing Fat Tuesdays, have to see that. I'm like a kid in a candy store from Australia. All these famous guitar players I've just heard on records, and now they're all playing in the same 2 weeks in New York. It's crazy. We went to see Les Paul, and there's this guy sitting at a table with, this statuesque blonde, and partway through the set, Les Paul goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, there's a very famous guitar player in the audience tonight, Mr. Jimmy Page." Excuse me. And then he goes real close to the microphone. "I've seen you play, boy. You can't pick your notes." And I'm like, oh, man, what does he mean by that? Is he criticizing Jimmy Page in front of it? But, Les Paul's known for that humor. Like, he had this salty humor. He was always fucking with people and putting them down and making jokes. But at the time, I was like, oh, that's so weird. And then afterwards, I came up to get an autograph from Jimmy. And he seemed like he'd been having a good time that night. So, but he was nice enough to sign it for me. So
that's cool. What? Wow, that's pretty cool that you're talk about timing, right? And serendipity.
Yeah. So my dad was.
Was he a player?
My dad was a diplomat, and he traveled all over the world. And
what does that mean, a diplomat? It's like one of those things in James Bond movies. You hear like,
right.
He's a diplomat. I'm like, fuck, what is that? It always it's like you just know, man, don't fuck with that guy. He's in got special protection. He gets, what does that actually mean?
It sounds like is he a prince or is he a member of the government?
Agent?
No. A diplomat, he was ambassador eventually, but a diplomat is a person that represents their country to other countries.
Okay.
So, Australia's representative to Thailand, for example, at one point was my dad. He was Australian ambassador to Thailand. So he lived in Thailand in the embassy, dealt with all relations between the two countries as the representative of Australia's government and their interests in a foreign country, right? And every country has ambassadors in basically every other country, and so he was. That's part of the reason I was actually born in Vienna, even though I'm Australian. I was born in Vienna because it was my dad's first overseas posting, and my mother was pregnant. So
he was a diplomat, Australian diplomat representing Australia for Vienna.
Yeah, to the Austrian government.
Wow.
But at that point, he wasn't the ambassador. So the ambassador is like the top chair in the embassy, right? And he was I forget the title, but the embassies. I mean, you've probably driven past embassies somewhere in DC, whatever. They've got the French flag up, and that's the French embassy. So they've got the ambassador, and then they've got all the various people below them, and the secretaries and everyone else working there. And in the case of like the Russian embassy, and the American embassies long suspected of spying on each other, they probably all do really, but they're not officially, part of espionage and CIA and all that. Anyway, where were we? Sorry.
Oh, nothing. You were talking about, what made you move to New York. Thanks for explaining that. I mean, you got to be a pretty slick guy to do that. I mean, like they wouldn't have a guy like me from the Bronx. Hey man, we're going to make you diplomat in the United States. I'd be like, fuck all. Yeah, man, let's do this. That's not the right response. I know that.
Well, yeah. Well, the funny thing is I think in America, a lot of times the ambassadorships are often political appointments, like an ex-politician or a big businessman or somebody or woman, or someone who's in favor of, in the favor of the current administration. They might post someone to represent the U.S. in another country because also it's, maybe it's a fairly cushy job and you live in a nice big place and you have staff and all that kind of stuff. My dad was what they call a career diplomat. So he entered the Australian Foreign Service, after college, and he got a job in the Foreign Service, and then they sent him on postings, and eventually he worked his way up within the Foreign Service. So, governments come and go. The prime minister comes and goes and gets elected and not elected and whatever. But these people in the Foreign Service continue their work. They're not just all political appointments. Some of them are just, they're part of the Department of Foreign Affairs in Australia, for example.
So did you do some cool stuff as a kid as a result, like because of, growing up in different places?
Yeah, well, my parents split up after we lived in New York when I was 4, 5, around there. And then I grew up with my mother in Australia. And my dad remarried and had 2 more kids. And then he also continued to be a diplomat and wound up living, usually each post was about 4 years. So I think it was Singapore and Geneva, Paris, Bangkok, New York. So my sister and I got to go and visit all those places. Like on our school holidays, we'd be getting on a plane and going off to Germany, and or something like that, which was, really fun and eye-opening at an early age to get to do international travel.
That is really cool, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back. Sorry, we went on a detour. You were going to.
What kind of picks do I use? No, just kidding.
What string gauge?
Yeah.
So I want to go back to moving to New York, but you moved to the States in '92 after you got the scholarship to Berkeley. How did you even find out about Berkeley and in Australia, and what made you want to go there? I'm sure they got some great conservatories in Australia.
They do. And I did do a jazz program in Canberra, which was not very well known at the time, but it was good. I had a really great teacher there, Dave Kane. But first of all, that whole story about my dad being a diplomat. So when I was around 18, 19, my dad was living in Geneva, but he was working in New York about 3 months of the year at the UN. And so a couple of times on my school vacation breaks, I came this time just by myself and came and stayed with my dad, just the two of us in his hotel. And he would for like 2 weeks, and he was working during the day, and I'd be walking around the streets of New York or going to Sam Ash or 48th Street or, walking around Washington Square Park and stuff like that. And then at night going out, Dad said, any music you want to go hear? He loves music too. So he would say, I'll take you. So we'd go to all these mostly guitar gigs. I mean, I saw Jacob Pastorius at that time, B.B. King, Joe Pass, Steve Morse, I think, was in town. There was a guitar festival going on. It was just luck that it was just so much going on. So I think that really, at that point, I was like, man, the New York this is the place. I mean, the musicians here, it's just, some of the most famous musicians in the world you can come and see them play in New York, even though a lot of people like that do come and tour in Australia, and you do get to see them along the way. But I just thought New York is the place to be. And I just felt the vibe. I loved it, So after I had finished music school in Australia, and then I moved to Sydney, and then I was doing well in Sydney. I was like, the young guy getting a lot of good gigs and getting recommended for stuff by people like Tommy Emmanuel or other players, So things were looking good for me. Did some big tours there and played on TV shows and stuff like that. But I also just had a feeling that, one, that the music scene in Australia is still fairly small. And two, I'd been to New York and had this feeling, and I wanted to keep learning and grow. So I just hit a point where I was like, I got to try and get over to the States somehow, as do many musicians from Australia and other countries too. I got to get there somehow. Maybe I'll go to Guitar Institute of Technology in Los Angeles. Also, mentioning Frank Gambale, his brother owned a music store in my hometown, Nunzio. And I'd go in there and
Nunzio Gambale?
Yeah, Nunzio Gambale.
Oh my God. Sounds like he's going to buy this or I'll kill you.
Yeah. And there was another brother who played guitar too. Anyway, he had this big music store like with Mesa Boogie and all that stuff. And, even in my hometown, he had like the latest gear from Los Angeles and all that. And so he was always saying, Frank's doing it. Frank went to GIT. Frank went, he's playing with Jean-Luc Ponty now. Frank is playing with Chick Corea now. I mean, it was amazing. Like this guy from out of town just went there and blew up, that scene in America,
So did that like sorry to cut you off, but did that, in your mind, did that open the door, say, hey, I have permission to do this now? This is like a possibility.
Yeah. I think it was certainly inspiring to see that could happen. And the fact that I had traveled as a kid and I'd been to New York also, and I loved it. And I think I knew another guy in Sydney. I can't even remember. I knew two people in Sydney one of them who'd been to Berkeley College of Music and then come back to Australia. And another bass player, I can never remember his name, and maybe one day someone will remind me who it was. But he got a scholarship and he came to New York and he studied with some famous jazz bassist. I can't remember, like some really heavy musician, And I was like, oh, wow, that's something you can do. So I applied for a scholarship. Actually, there was Australia, similar to Canada, was funding the arts quite a lot, and maybe still is. I'm not quite sure now how it looks now, but I knew a few musicians who had applied to the Australian Arts Council for a grant. And the grant could be, I want to make a new record, or it could be, I want to go and study overseas or something, or I want to put on an exhibition or something like that. And I applied for this Arts Council grant it was for $10,000. And I won it. I got it. And then I also applied to Berkeley College of Music and sent my demo tape in, and I got a scholarship from Berkeley as well that paid most of my expenses. So I was like, well, that's the obvious answer,
Yeah.
I can go to, I can at least, the first year or so I'll be fine with money, and I can, although 10 grand doesn't do much these days, but
but back then you could,
with a scholarship at Berkeley and living in the dorms. And so I was like, all right, this is my ticket to go to the States. And also, so how did I hear about Berkeley? I think I had just read about it in, I don't know, Guitar Player magazine or something. Like Pat Metheny went there. I think Steve Vai went there. Chick Corea went there. There's the list of people who've been to Berkeley, although a lot of them, as it turns out, didn't stay there very long because they were so talented. Their careers took off and they just left the school, But there's this long association of great musicians that went through there. So that's why I applied there. And then I just sold all my stuff and took one Strat and a suitcase and booked a ticket, showed up in freezing cold Boston in January because like a dope, I didn't realize the academic year in America starts in September.
Okay.
In Australia, it starts in January because,
So you just applied to go to January.
I selected, I want to start in January, the beginning of next year. That makes sense to me. And then I realized I was starting halfway through the semester. Right. Got there, it was freezing cold, and I didn't know anyone, living in a crappy little dorm room. But it was great. It was a great experience.
People, did you go to school with people that you are still friendly with, or that have made it musically?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the great things about going to Berkeley, and some people say the best part about going to Berkeley really is the connections you make, the friends you make, musicians that you meet and wind up. Yeah, I mean, when I first moved to New York, my first paid gigs in New York were a friend of mine from Berkeley as a keyboard player recommended me to a singer who was doing her own music and wanted to hire a band. And I have friends still in the city that, that I'll play with sometimes or see. And, we met at Berkeley, and some went to LA, a lot came to New York, and some have done incredibly well. Most everyone's done really well, but, some are at the top of the game, and it's It's one of the great things about going there.
Very cool. You want to say any names of people that you went with?
Oh yeah.
And if you don't, that's cool.
Yeah, sure. I mean, of course, at the risk of forgetting about other people, but one of my best friends in New York, Richard Hammond, who's a fine bass player from New Zealand, who's the bassist on.
Imagine that you come to New York, you become friends with the guys from New Zealand. That's quite funny, man.
Yeah. He plays on Hamilton. He's the bassist on Hamilton, but he's played with lots of great artists as well, touring and stuff. I was at school with Ethan Eubanks, who's quite a feature of the music scene around New York City, and Why Not Jansfeld, who moved to LA, another great bass player. John Daly, so many people, and some that, or like say Steve Hamilton, piano player. He lives in, he's from Scotland, and I think he's back in Scotland now. But he lived in Europe, and anyway, he wound up the keyboardist for Bill Bruford.
Oh wow!
Yeah, he wound up his keyboard player and composer and arranger sometimes, and then I think Billy Cobham as well.
Holy crap!
Yeah, this guy. Yeah, and he was like a genius piano player, and he was like 19 when he was at Berkeley. I mean, I was 25 because I already been doing some stuff, And then some like Matthew Garrison was there a little bit before me. He's still around town. He's a fantastic jazz bassist, and Abe Laboriel Jr., the drummer.
Oh wow, for Paul McCartney.
Yeah, Paul McCartney and everyone else. And he was there.
What a talent that guy is, man.
Yeah, he was there before. I think he'd left, but he was still sort of around the scene. And every year or every generation of Berkeley students, there's always like a few who are a few players who sort of like stand out, even when they're there, and they just take off,
Wow. By the way, man, yeah, thank you so much for that, Mike. This sounds great.
Oh, cool.
No, it's awesome.
Should I do sing a song for you now? Do a vocal
if you'd like, man. Bust out your guitar. It's all up to you, man. When you first moved to the city, where'd you live, and like, how'd you go about getting gigs?
Well, where I lived is funny because at that,
it's always funny in New York where you live, man.
Well, it was funny for a different, probably not the reason you're expecting. I lived in some funny places for sure, but the very first place I lived in New York. So my dad. My father, keep saying my dad.
They call it dad here, man.
Yeah, I know. So dad had finished up in Bangkok and was appointed Australian ambassador to the United Nations.
Oh man, don't tell me.
His name's Richard Butler, by the way, if people want to. It's a lot of my friends know this stuff, but they want to look him up. So, and then he later became the chief weapons inspector to go into Iraq and determine if they have weapons of mass destruction, which is a whole other story. Anyway, so he was Australian ambassador to the UN. After I went to Berkeley, he's like, guess what? I'm moving to New York. I'm going to be the Australian ambassador to the UN. I'm like, that's great. That's how convenient. So I'd come and visit, and he was living in the ambassador's residence.
Like in the 40s, they're like it's like near the United Nations, isn't
near
it?
The UN in the 50s.
Oh my God! So you're living. Oh my God!
Like a massive old New York style 2-story apartment with like maid's quarters and a grand piano in the lobby and the chandelier. Like what you expect in the movies or whatever. Because he didn't own it. I want to make that clear. My dad's not a wealthy man, but the Australian government owned it, but he got to live in it and be the ambassador. And so did I for my first year in New York.
Did you invite your buddies over? You're starving artists and you're living in this place. Oh my God, that must have been the hangout spot. And they come over and
the look in their face as they, come up the elevator that opens into your living room with the doorman with the cap on and everything. Oh, you have a visitor, Mr. Butler, and they come up and, hey, how's it going? And the look on their face, they'd be like, what the?
Wow. So how long did you do that for?
My first year in New York. So, I mean, it was great. I didn't pay rent and lived in this amazing place. But honestly, at the time, I wasn't, had I been a more reckless and foolish young fellow, I might have sought to take more advantage of, masquerading as some kind of, like I was a somebody, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I was very happy to be there, and then eventually moved out of there with my girlfriend at the time, and got an apartment down the East Village, and started teaching at Sam Ash, when they had a Sam Ash Music Institute above the school in 48th Street.
Sure.
I was just like, I gotta make some money, and managed to get some teaching work. So to start out with, so yeah, my first year was living in an apartment that I will never live in again in my entire life, most likely.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Unless something changed. Most of my next record goes,
platinum,
triple platinum on Spotify, and I'll get a check for $2,000. It'll be great.
Oh my
but that's
God.
Another story.
But so you were teaching in the city. How'd you get your first gigs?
Well, a friend of mine from Berkeley was working with this singer, Rachel Sage is her name, like a singer-songwriter in the sort of folk pop, folk rock kind of world. And remember, this is also getting into kind of the Lilith Fair era of music. Anyway, he recommended me to play guitar with Rachel, and she was, so a lot of, at that time there were all these singer-songwriter artists, and still are, particularly female singer-songwriters. Sarah McLachlan was huge, and Sheryl Crow and Paula Cole and all these sorts of people. And there was a big scene in New York, and they needed bands. And the ones that had a bit of money somehow could afford it, that they could hire a band. They could pay a few bucks to rehearse and pay a few more bucks to do a gig, like a 45 or 50-minute set at the Bitter End or one of these downtown clubs, And so I started doing that with her, and then that was a whole scene. So, and a lot of my friends from Berkeley and also, there was work in that scene, and good people making interesting music. And it was, to me, actually, the thing I really liked about it was all original music. When, I came from back home for a long time anyway, playing in cover bands, or a cover band, and maybe you'd write a couple of tunes, But these people were all just, no, I'm doing my music. I want to get a record deal. I want to be an artist. I'm writing my own songs. I've got ideas about how they should sound and what kind of instrumentation and what kind of parts you're playing and stuff. So it was, it was creative. You like creating arrangements and helping people make their music as good as it can be. And they were paying. So there was work in that. And then I'd meet other people, and I was, before I knew it, I was playing with a lot of people in that scene. Going from gig to gig, sometimes on the same night, and certainly many times a week, and their rehearsals, and then they're doing their records, and going and doing albums with them and stuff. And that was sort of my bread and butter,
So like the universe organically supported what you were doing.
Yeah, I think, or another way maybe I would look at it is I showed up and I could play guitar. And I had skills. I'd also, aside from the jazz stuff that I was studying and the sort of fusion stuff that I was writing, I'd been in rock bands in Australia and played with, some of the well-known artists there, and sort of, I had professional experience too. I wasn't totally green. So it wasn't a stretch at all for me. It was a different genre of music than I wasn't, to be honest, I wasn't really that into or knowledgeable about that style of music at the time. And later on became a big fan of Jonathan Brooke or Sean Colvin or some of the artists from that, or Paula Cole, some of those artists, But at the time I was into different kind of music, but there was work there. And there were good players doing it, so.
New York audiences versus, or are New York audiences different than the rest of the country?
Yeah, probably.
In what way?
Well, especially the scene I'm talking. First of all, New York. New York, the city that never sleeps. New York has so much entertainment and art that you can go and check out. Not just in music, obviously, in museums and in art galleries and the opera and the ballet and Broadway and plays and on it goes. And then in music, there's so much people can see and they can spend their money on. So I'd say it's a tough audience, and more critical. And then when you get into certain scenes, and the scene I'm talking about, like these, downtown clubs and stuff, you've got so many musicians running around in those clubs too, and a lot of these clubs make their money out of, all these artists trying to do their stuff. They're not really paying them much money, or even not really paying them any money. So you got this whole scene of people, sort of similar people, and they're very critical, because they're doing it too, And then you've got their friends and family coming and seeing their shows, and their fans. Hopefully, they're building up fans. That's what they're trying to do, Later, the experiences I've had touring around the States. I mean, playing with some of these different artists, and going and playing concerts in theaters and concerts in rock clubs or in festivals, or you're out on the road, and these people have bought tickets to come and see one of their favorite artists. So there's, it's a very different vibe. They're showing up. They're ready to love what they hear. They're enthusiastic. They know the music ahead of time. They've got the records. They're fans. They're fully fans. And that's why they came to the show. That's why they spent the money. So that's a very different. It's a much easier thing, really.
Yeah.
Than playing small clubs to a sort of either discerning or couldn't give a shit.
Well, they're there to hang out at the club and socialize, and the band happens to be playing, and
or you get that whole thing of, I mean, I don't know if you ever experienced this whole scene, and it's still alive in many clubs in New York, but where they would have a band on every hour, like now it's Rockwood Music Hall,
right,
with their 3 different stages, and a lot of times they'll have a band on every hour, probably starting at 6 or 7 p.m., going till maybe midnight or 1 a.m., different band each hour.
No, I never. When I was there, it was like I'd go to Kettle of Fish, which doesn't exist anymore, or Bottom Line or The Bitter End, and you have a band play a set 2-3 hours.
Yeah,
they take
the
a break.
Bottom Line would be like bigger shows,
right.
Bigger artists, and The Bitter End would sort of more, slightly smaller, and but The Bitter End sort of works like this now, and each band had to bring in their following, Oh yeah, we got 20 people to come to see our show. That's great. We got 40 people,
Right.
It's a different paradigm from going and playing a show at the Fillmore in San Francisco and it being sold out or something like that.
Yeah, with Sting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally get it, man. Let's talk about some of the artists that you have worked with, and if you could talk about, Ben, how you got the gig, and maybe a cool or interesting story about working with them. And the first one is Chris Botti, and I wasn't familiar with him, but can you talk? And for other people that may not be, I know he's doing 175 sold out shows a year. So
like that,
I'm in the minority. So for the other 2 people that like me may not be familiar with him, can you talk about him for a minute first?
Sure. Yeah. Chris Botti's a trumpet player. He's a phenomenal musician and a showman, an entertainer. And he has created a career for himself as an instrumentalist. He doesn't sing. And he's created a career for himself that doesn't happen very often for any instrumentalist.
Yeah.
The biggest careers tend to go to singers and bands. And he's sort of done it. And his music is, in some sense jazz, but he also, incorporates a lot of classical music, classical pop music, some R&B, and some other influences. He's kind of shifted course over the years. People knew him as he was the trumpet player in Sting's band. I think it was around mid-90s. Mid to late 90s. I might have that wrong. Also, Paul Simon. He also was on one of those TV shows where he was the band leader on a daytime TV show, and was dating a famous TV personality. And so he kind of, maybe he was on Oprah or something. I don't know all the details, but he kind of transitioned into, he's a very good looking guy, so he kind of transitioned into a sort of more of a household name type of star rather than, a jazz artist that people in the jazz world know about and no one else knows about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he hires excellent musicians, and he does tour. I think we averaged, I don't know, 150, 175, maybe 200 shows a year.
That's incredible for an instrumentalist.
Been doing that. Yeah, and he's been doing that for well over, like 12, 14 years. I don't know what it is now. And playing, performing arts centers all around America, theaters, summer festivals, the wineries in California and all that, and then going overseas and playing. We played China, Korea, a lot of Asia, Australia, Eastern Europe. So being in his band is you get a lot of frequent flyer points. You are flying, every other day.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah, it was a great experience. I was with him for about 4 years. The last couple of years, I was full time with him and on every show. And how that came about. Oh, and also on the various shows we would do, we'd have Sting come and sit in with us and sing some songs because they're very good friends. John Mayer came in and did songs played some ripping guitar solos with us. David Foster, the piano player, arranger, composer, the famous guy.
Those are like huge names, man.
Yeah. Joshua Bell, the famous classical violinist, who was also a little bit crossover, I guess you could say. So a lot of, and then we do shows with orchestras too, which was a new thing for me to be playing in a band out in front of a 50-piece orchestra with a conductor. We do that about maybe 1 in 10 shows. So how I got the gig, I was actually out on tour with George Michael. I was in London, was the end of the tour, and got a phone call from Chris's manager, Bobby Colombi, who is...
Man, guy... Okay, so wait a minute. That guy was in a band. And he... Right? Wasn't he...
Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Yeah, he was in Blood, Sweat,
and Tears. The drummer.
And then
He's
the
original drummer.
Okay. I've got to get that guy on my show. I've heard him mentioned by so many people.
Oh my God! If you get him on the show, you'll need to buy a new hard drive to record the conversation because he's got so many stories. I mean, I sat up on one long tour bus ride with him one time. Everyone went to bed in the bus and we sat in the lounge because I just told him I'd watched the Jaco Pastorius documentary that came out recently on Netflix, and Bobby's in it. Big surprise. He said, well, I said, I did not realize you produced Jaco's first album. And then the stories, he told me all about working with Jaco and making that record like song for song. This is how we did this song. And, I told him we should do this, and he produced the album, and that's just one subject. So if you get him just talking about that, it would be a whole show. Anyway, so Bobby called me. He said, I manage Chris Botti. We're looking for a guitar player that lives in New York on the East Coast. Because the guitar player at the time lived in Brazil. Not that convenient when you have one-off shows in the States to fly from Brazil all the time. Great player, by the way. Anyway, they said, we're looking for a guitar player for some shows, preferably someone who lives in New York. I've been asking around. A lot of people have mentioned your name. Are you interested? I said, well, I'm actually out with George Michael right now, and we're wrapping up soon, and I can't do these first couple of shows. Anyway, I ended up doing one show, which was the audition, really. No rehearsal.
No rehearsal?
No rehearsal. That's the way it goes in that camp. No rehearsal. They sent me a board tape of a show and a few charts, which were sketchy at best or not that related to what was happening on the show, and just learn the entire show, like a 2.5-hour show, all this different music, and show up at sound check, meet Chris, play a couple of tunes, and then do the show. and I guess they liked me, because then they hired me again and again, and I wound up being his guitar player for a few years.
But if you think of it, there is no better way to audition someone, man. No, I mean, from the employer's standpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, like here's
not necessarily from the player's standpoint.
No, but and it depends in a sense, because if you don't learn it, no, but if you obviously did your homework and you took sort of chicken shit and made chicken salad out of it, you got sketchy charts, you didn't have a lot, and you sat there and, played it 100 times and got it down. That says a lot about,
Well, it absolutely, and it's I guess first of all it means that their attitude is you're not going to get the call if you're not good enough to do this gig,
right?
But enough people have recommended you and said you'd be great on this gig, so we're assuming that they're right. You're going to be great on this gig. And secondly, if you don't do your homework and don't show up prepared, whatever that means for you. And this is I think an important lesson in general. It's like whatever it takes for you to feel comfortable to be on that stage without a rehearsal or without anything. You have to do that. We're not telling you what that is. And if you feel like, oh man, I'm just check out the music a little bit, I'll be cool, I'll show up, I'll play, I'm so great. That's great. If that's your version of being prepared, that's great. But only how much preparation you're going to have to do so that you can feel comfortable, so that you're not a nervous wreck and you can play great and be cool and relax enough about it that it's not, sweating bullets the whole time kind of thing.
Which is, I think it's great because you'd rather have a person that's completely independent and doesn't need hand holding on your team, because that individual is going to run. How you do one thing is how you do everything. Like if that's what you're doing day one, that's who you are. You're locked in, no worries, nothing to think about. You clearly don't need babysitting, which is the most important thing, especially a guy at this level. He doesn't want, he's not looking to bring in someone's drama and maintenance. He's doing 175, 200 tours with bringing in Sting and guys like that on stage. I think he doesn't have the time to fuck around and, you need people that are independent, man. I totally get that.
Yeah, exactly. And it does give you, everyone a chance to kind of see what you're made of, not just in terms of your playing, but like what your attitude is and how you do prepare and how you present yourself. And, there's plenty of bands that like hold auditions and book out rehearsal studios for days and have different players come in and whatever. So there's all different ways of doing it. But it was a great experience, and I was glad to get the gig and be a part of that team for a while. It was really fun, and also it was allowed me the opportunity to get to know Sting a little bit and work with him there, and then I wound up playing with him outside of that. So,
I want to talk about that in a minute. One question: where was your first gig with Chris?
It was I'll tell you exactly where it was. It was in Rockport, Massachusetts. Which is also coincidentally the hometown, I think, still of Paula Cole, who is another singer, artist that I work with, who's an amazing songwriter and singer. And she had actually sung on some Chris Botti records as well. So that was kind of a nice little coincidence.
So you're in Rockport, and he says basically you got the job. Did you have to go home, or did you have time, or did you just fly to the next? We're in Rhode Island tomorrow night.
It actually worked out great because it was a situation where, there wasn't another gig right away. I think the next one was in a few weeks, and I think Bobby had said, are you available for these dates? And the first one is this one. Put it this way: if it didn't work out on the first gig, they would have said, "Yeah, we're not going to use you on the next one."
Yeah.
And I know that has happened to people. I've heard the stories, and also he's had a lot of musicians through his band, like really great players, but he's been doing this a long time, and he's had a lot of players through. Some have stayed longer than others. But that was around, I think it was in November, and then we had the Blue Note. And so Chris does 28 nights straight every year at the Blue Note.
That's crazy, man.
2 sets a night, without a break. And that means no Christmas, New Year's, nothing. No nights off for 28 nights straight. First show, I think, first show's at 8 o'clock and then we get out of there at like 1 a.m. or something. And
28, that works out great for a guy like you that lives in the city.
Yeah.
I mean, not great as, best in a bad situation.
Yeah.
But if you don't, that's tough, man.
Yeah. Some of the guys would be coming in from New Jersey and stuff like that. And driving back every night. It's crazy. But yeah, so that I actually had never played at the Blue Note before that. I'd been to see a lot of shows there. I mean, amazing, the greats of jazz playing there. And all of a sudden, my first time playing at the Blue Note, it's like, 28 days straight, eating the Blue Note dinner in the tiny Blue Note dressing room upstairs every night.
That's like on just off 6th Avenue and like 8th or something?
It's on West 3rd off 6th Avenue.
Okay. That's where I saw Les Paul then.
That
was where I saw Les Paul.
Blue awning up front. And there are Blue Notes now. We ended up doing a lot of them. There are Blue Notes there's one in Napa, the town of Napa Valley, in Tokyo.
Yeah, a lot of guys I've spoke to play Tokyo.
Japan. There's Japan. There is Hawaii now. We did the one in Hawaii, at Waikiki. And the one in China now, I think. Anyway, they keep expanding the franchising, and
I got to be careful with that.
Italy. Man. Yeah. Actually, I think one of the franchises is totally independent. It might be the Japanese one. I forget. It's no longer part of the same original.
It's like, I remember when my wife and we got married in Hawaii. This is a long time ago. And we were so excited. In fact, we had this box. I just looked at it the other day. It had the menu from the Hard Rock. The Hard Rock from, we're on our marriage in Hawaii, it was like a souvenir, the big paper menu. And because at the time there weren't many of them. This is 1994, right? And now
Waikiki Beach.
That was the only one there, I think. No, I think maybe it was in Maui. It was in Maui.
Okay.
And or maybe I think it was Maui, but now, and I don't know about now right now, but even 10 years ago, like you'd go somewhere, it's like, oh, there's a Hard Rock here. Oh, big deal. There's one on every corner with like Starbucks so you got to be, the Blue Note's got such a prestigious name, I'd hate to see something like, something similar happen to that because there's so many of them all over the place.
It's amazing, that place. I mean, I remember going again on those visits back in the 80s when I visited New York. I remember going there, it's the famous Blue Note, and you go in there and it's like, it's small and they cram people in like sardines, you're sitting, your elbows are bumping the person next to you and, your chair. I mean, I go in there playing and I'm standing at the front of the stage and my pedal board's there and there's a table right there. And, the audience is, I joke around, bend down and, pick a French fry off their plate and stuff. Exactly. And one woman put her pocketbook down right on my pedals.
You're kidding.
Before I walked on stage. And I walked up, I'm like, what the fuck is this? And I just picked it up and, moved it, whatever. And she gave me a dirty look. It's like, yeah, I think you came here to see the band, right? And I'm in the band, so you might want to, Yeah, and then, of course, we start playing and all is forgiven. And she's a big fan. And it was just funny.
That is funny, man. So talk about Sting now. So you got the gig with Sting, obviously. He heard you playing with Chris.
Well, actually, the Sting thing worked in a few different ways at the same time, and first of all, let me say, I'm a huge Sting fan, and when I was a kid back in Australia playing in a cover band, one of these cover bands I played, we played all this Police stuff. I mean, I went to see them. I went to see him. I think I saw the Police, and then I also saw the tour, his first Dream of the Blue Turtles band tour, and everyone was just like, the Police broke up and then, and now he's hiring like the best of the best musicians around the world. And, so then it became a thing like, oh, maybe you get the gig with Sting, or, oh, that's Sting on the phone. That was always the joke with the musicians. Like, it was like, the coveted thing, like maybe one day that could happen. So let me just say that. I mean, it was, it really is a dream come true for me to any time I've worked with him, and I love his music, and he's really a generous, warm person, and it feels great to me to get to do that. And, so first I was playing in his musical. He wrote a Broadway show called The Last Ship. Wrote and initially wasn't acting in it, but then he did actually step into one of the roles on stage as well. And I was one of the 2 guitar players on that show. Matt Beck was the other one. We did Spider-Man together as well. And now we're doing Mean Girls together. So, did I mention you should interview Matt Beck? But anyway, so I got Matt, recommended me. But I also knew Rob Mathis, who was orchestrating that show. So anyway, I wound up with a chair on that show, and we played at the Tony Awards before we even did the show. So that was the first time I met Sting and rehearsed the theme song for, the title song, The Last Ship, rehearsed that, and then we went and played it on the Tonys. And then did the show on Broadway. And then at the same time I was doing the show on Broadway and seeing Sting every day, I was also in Chris Botti's band. And then we were playing at the Blue Note. And then I was subbing out of The Last Ship, sending my sub in because I had to go to the Blue Note and play at night with Chris. And then Sting was doing The Last Ship. And then after performing on Broadway, he would come down to the Blue Note at like 11 or 11:30 at night, sometimes with Trudy, his wife, and then sit and watch our show, and then get up and sing with us and do 1 or 2 or 3 songs with the band.
That's got to be a hell of a treat for, like, you're in the audience and Sting comes up just because of he's a super talented guy, and you're not expecting it. It's like, it's like getting bumped up to first class on an airplane or something like that.
Yeah, a couple of times he'd be in there, and he had this great big beard. It was part of the character in the show. He had this big bushy beard, and he'd be sitting there. I'm sure most people had not recognized him, and he's sitting right there. And then Chris would go, I'd like to introduce a special guest, a longtime friend of mine, blah, blah, blah. And we start playing a Sting song, and he'd walk up on stage, and the audience would gasp and cheer. And, I remember New Year's Eve, we played like the midnight struck, and we played Every Breath You Take with Sting, and people going nuts. And
that's really cool. That's got to be a great experience too. Music as a musician.
Yeah, super fun. And very exciting. And then, so now I kind of knew him, for the show, his show, and I also knew him through Chris Botti's band. And then I also knew him through his arranger, orchestrator, producer, Rob Mathis, who does everything. He's just a musical genius, that guy. And then then they had a show. So after, I'm not playing with Chris Botti anymore, and I'm not doing Sting's musical anymore because it's closed. And they had a show in Florida, actually. It was a Tampa
Ruth Eckerd?
50th anniversary of their orchestra or something like that, a gala event. And they hired Sting to do his Symphonicities concert, which is Sting with an orchestra doing orchestral versions of his songs. So I got hired for that. And then this year I got hired so he's been out on tour with Shaggy, Sting and Shaggy. They did a record together. And I got the call so now I'm dealing with just his management, and they're just calling me, or not calling, people don't call anymore, but emailing me. And
does nobody call at all?
Not very much.
Yeah. You know what? They my kids, it's always interesting to see the work. It makes you feel very old. Like, they'll do everything they'll be in next door and text me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fuck, man, you can't, I didn't say anything to them. Of course, they're just not doing anything wrong. It's just different.
Yeah. People would text each other when sitting across the table from, it's,
or they'll have relationship major conversation, breakups on text.
Yep. I know.
And I always go I'm the other way. If I have something bad, I always want to call because I just feel like, anyway, we're getting off the subject. But yeah, it's just. No,
I agree. Yeah. There are a lot of instances where phone calls are better. And, I remember we're probably old enough to remember when it was people complaining, people just call on the phone. They don't get together anymore. They're away from their cell phones now, and now the younger kids, and then email, most business stuff is by email. And, but the younger generation don't email.
No, never.
Messaging apps and whatever, text. Facebook messaging, download text, chats, whatever. So that's a funny thing. But anyway, yeah, I got asked by management to do a couple of shows on the Sting Shaggy tour. So Sting's longtime guitar player, Dominic Miller, is still his guitar player and has been with him, I think, something like 30 years. I mean, that wasn't the first tour after the Dream of the Blue Turtles. Dream of the Blue Turtles album, there was no guitar player. Sting played guitar. I mean, there was a guitar player. It was Sting. Darryl Jones played bass. And then the tour after that, actually, Jeffrey Lee Campbell, who's another New York guitar player.
Yeah, he's coming on. He's
written a book about it. Yeah, he'll tell you all about it.
Please, I think it's called Please
Stand So Close to Me.
Yeah, Please Stand So Close to Me.
Yeah, which I've read. Hey, Jeff, I've read your book. I think it's awesome.
Very cool, man.
And his stories of playing with Sting, I mean, that are just amazing. When it was the heyday, and they're doing massive arenas in Brazil and all that stuff. I mean, but anyway, so I got asked to do a couple of shows, essentially subbing for Dominic Miller, because in their scheduling of the Sting and Shaggy tour, there are a couple of things that Dominic, I guess, had conflicts with. Tours get booked generally far ahead, but sometimes they add a lot of dates last minute. Maybe you've got time off, and then all of a sudden there's an offer for a festival, and then they take it, and you're expected to drop what you're doing. And anyway, so I don't know exactly how it happened, but they needed me for some shows, and one of them was playing on the island of Curacao, which I'd never been to before.
Wow, that sounds miserable.
Just beautiful. Playing a big outdoor, it's the North Sea Jazz Festival, Curacao, playing a big outdoor event with Sting and Shaggy. And it's just Sting's band with a couple of people from Shaggy's band in the band as well. And, a full 2-hour and whatever concert. And just stepping in, we did get to rehearse in New York ahead of time, because Dominic couldn't make the rehearsals either. So I kind of stood in as the rehearsal guitar player, and also Dominic's son, Rufus Miller, was playing guitar as well. I guess rhythm guitar, I guess you could say, and some few solos and stuff. And so that they weren't too worried, but they needed someone to do Dominic's chair and do his gig, and they called me. So I got to go down to Curacao and play this amazing concert down there, and stay in a beautiful hotel on the beach and the pool, and bring my girlfriend down. And it was a special weekend.
Very cool, man.
Yeah.
Any funny or interesting stories from that experience?
Yeah, I don't know. It was just overall great experience. Everyone is so cool. I mean, in this level, and same with the George Michael crew. And I mean, when you're at that level, their management, their crew, everyone in the band, I mean, it's such a professional, well-run, everyone's so good. I mean, the guitar tech, I mean, everyone is so good. The front of house guy, everyone's so good at what they do, and they've been doing it a long time. And they're not kids out there, goofing off. And of course, people have fun and have fun in their own way. Some people it's playing golf, and other people might be doing other things. But, it's just such a breeze working in that environment. And they were so super nice to me, and Sting was very happy. And, it was great.
You mean like they run like a well-oiled machine?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And everyone does their part, and everyone does it very, very well. And there's no stress. There doesn't need to be stressful drama, right? When everyone's doing their job really well. Yeah, totally. And they've done it many times before, so.
Ben, have you had any like lower points or like in your career, or like obstacles that you've had to overcome, either music, business, life, and how did you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, mostly I've made a living playing music my whole life. I've never had a day job. except I worked in a newsstand for like a year when I was in high school. But, you know, that doesn't mean it's always been easy. And, you know, I ran into some times where, I mean, the first time I learned a lesson was when I went on tour with an artist in Australia, Richard Clapton, no relation to Eric Clapton. And he's like a classic singer-songwriter, rock and roller, and he's just great. And I was 22 or something like that, and got the gig with him and went on tour around Australia for 3 months or something. And I really thought, you know, I made it. Like, now I'm in this league, you know, now I'm like playing with this guy, and maybe someone else is going to call me, and, you know, and then I got back to town after the tour, which was a fantastic experience all around Australia and everything. And got back to Sydney, and it was just the classic thing. I literally had lost all my gigs in Sydney because other people were doing them, you know, because I wasn't there. And I had no gigs and no, you know, I hadn't saved anywhere near as much money as I thought. What sounded like a lot of money I was making, you know, really wasn't. And I had a little bit, you know, to last me a little while. And I was like, oh man, what now, you know? And I think I even went so far as to, a friend of my mother's owned a pub. And I went and I talked to her and said, could I get a job, you know, in your pub?
Sure.
She was like, well, yeah, but the people I employ, that, you know, they've all got bartending experience, and they, you know what I mean? And she's like, well, can't you get more, you know, are you not getting work? And anyway, so that was, you know, that was a low point. And then I figured out, well, I'm going to start teaching in my apartment, and I put an ad in the paper, and did that thing, you know, what a lot of people do. They, you know, they teach to supplement. And that actually worked out to be really fun, and I enjoyed it. And then, of course, I started getting really busy again, and everything kind of fell into place again, you know. So, you know, I've had a few times like that where I've been caught off guard, and but fortunately not for a very long time. And you know, when people sort of, a lot of people who've never been a musician, or they don't know anyone who's a musician, and you're talking to them and they say, oh, but it must be really, you know, hard being a freelancer, and you never know how much money you're going to make at the end of the month, and that kind of thing. And I always say, well, I kind of look at it as like the average at the end of the year, you know, and
right.
Things generally always been on the upward trend. Occasionally there's a really good year, maybe it comes back down, but, you know, so at the end of the, you might have some, you just have to get used to, oh, I've got, you know, no work for the next few weeks. So maybe I'll do something else. Maybe I'll write some songs for my own project or whatever, instead of getting too stressed out about, oh, maybe no one's ever going to call me again. I've just done my last gig, you know, and to have a little bit more faith that that things are moving forward, and you know, it can change in any second. You can get that phone call or that email or whatever completely out of the blue, and all of a sudden you're looking at, you know, a real gig with real money. So
did you ever have, so you've been pretty good about when you have these lulls. First of all, I thought you were going to say, I was like laughing inside. I thought you were going to say, yeah, the toughest was when I had to leave the ambassador's quarters. I don't know how I did it.
I should. Oh man, I missed an opportunity.
I was like thinking about that.
It was so hard, and
I had to move into an apartment in Manhattan.
I had to. Yeah, I know. You know, I'm still looking longingly across the river at that apartment I used to live in.
Dude, that had to be badass, man. I can't imagine. But
I know.
So you've always been pretty good about just having faith that things are going to turn around, or that, you know, or having the maturity to know, hey, this is a lull, this is normal, boom, I know this is going to work out.
I think theoretically, philosophically, absolutely, I know that now, and I'm much better about it.
Yeah.
But I think, we're all human. And when you're in a situation where all of a sudden one source of income is gone.
It's stressful, man.
And especially if you're on a gig where you're making a lot of money and that goes away, and all gigs go away, one way or another. They're not, very few people are on some kind of gravy train for their whole entire life. Very, 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 very few people. But, when that goes away and you're like, oh, wow. I mean, yeah, obviously you try and save money and you try and be smart and not completely change. One of the things I think when you're younger is you might completely change your lifestyle when you start making money and you just spend it all, Yeah. So I have it together a lot more financially and business wise now than I used to. And I definitely, made some mistakes.
Well, those dips teach you that real freaking quick. Yeah. And that's anybody who owns their own business. I say that all the time. And you guys are entrepreneurs. I know that a lot of musicians don't look at themselves like that, but they should, because they are,
Right.
And so they need to have certain, I guess, tools or whatever or coping mechanisms to manage that or understand that. But that's reality of it. Anybody who owns a business is going to have lulls.
Yes, for sure.
If you were, is there any advice that you think if you gave yourself years ago would have made your life easier, less stressful, personally, musically?
Well, I give myself a lot of advice, the younger me, but I don't know if I would have listened. And some of it, I think probably people actually even said to me at the time. And I probably, there's some things that when you're young, they just don't. They go in one ear and out the other. You know what I mean?
I totally know.
They don't resonate with you because you haven't. You have to go through a certain amount of pain. On a personal front, like with relationships, you have to go through having a really terrible relationship to go, oh yeah, no, I never want to be with someone like that again. I know for sure. Cured of that. Or some of the professional things as well. I mean, I when I was younger, I was very fortunate to kind of, be given the space to like be into music, and no one was trying too hard to stop me for do that. And if I wanted lessons, they'd pay for a teacher and all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't a struggle. I'd like to, go back and be my coach standing there and saying, now listen, because you don't necessarily know at the time you're going to wind up being a musician. I mean, at a certain point, I think maybe it's 15 or 16, I probably thought, I did think I want to be a guitar player. That's what I want to do, but you don't necessarily know it. And certainly your family, in my case, I mean, if your family are not professional musicians, they don't necessarily know it or know how serious to take it or how much of a thing it's really going to be and all that. And, wouldn't it be great if I had a me, coaching me at the time saying, you don't realize it yet, but this is what you got to be doing. This is what you got to work on now. And, you got to get more disciplined and work harder and take more initiative and stuff like that. But actually, I was very lucky to meet Tommy Emmanuel, and, he's just so enthusiastic and encouraging to so many people, not just to me, that was just like a chart, like putting your hand in the electric socket. Like every time I would see him, just because his enthusiasm and his guitar playing and his stories and jokes and everything, I'd just be on a high. Like just if I got to hang out with him or see a show, and even though it's not necessarily about like holding your hand and guiding you along, it's giving you a real boost.
Yeah.
I do remember one thing. I know this isn't exactly the question you're asking, but I know I do remember one specific thing that he said to me once when I think I had some kind of question, like, I don't know, some kind of naive question, like, how did you get to do this so well or that so well or something guitar-wise or whatever? And he just looked at me straight and said, there's no substitute for hard work. And I was like, oh, okay. Because you think, you think someone like that, oh, he's just brilliant.
You got a trick.
He's a genius.
Yeah.
He's just born genius, and he was playing since he was super young. But you forget, I know for a fact. I mean, he worked his ass off and practices all the time to this day. And, it's like, it's very easy to miss that, you go and look behind the curtain and there's someone who's just like so hardworking and focused,
Man, it's interesting you say that, because I interviewed Steve Morse last week.
Oh my God! Wow.
Not only is he just a just really sweet, kind, I mean, incredibly well mannered, and just that guy. His work, and like everybody who I interview has a great work ethic. You can't get to be a musician playing for, even if you're a younger cat, and you're 35, and you've been scary that 35 is young to me now, but doing this for 20 years, you can't do that unless you have a good work ethic. But that guy, he practices every single day. He goes, man, I have to, because if I don't practice, I hear it in my chops. He goes, if I would have missed 2 days of practice, I suck. And his mind, and he's like, I will never go to a show and have somebody sacrificing money or whatever they've sacrificed to be there, and I'm not giving them 100%, being the best I could be. I mean, this, it's listening to the best, one of the best guitar players in the world say that. It's just like, wow. That's why he's Steve Morse, though.
Yeah. No, I was, oh man, I remember the first time I heard the Dixie Dregs album, Industry Standard.
Yeah.
And Steve Morse was winning best overall guitar players, every year or whatever. And I got that record and I was just so blown away, and loved so much about it, the rock stuff and the intricate stuff. And, actually I have a funny Steve Morse story. I met Steve Morse, I think, once in my life. Actually, a friend of mine, Van Romain, plays drums with him. I don't think I ever told him this story either. So, but it's a funny story because it's embarrassing to me. But we're back it was sometime in the mid '80s. The trio, John McLaughlin, Paco de Lucia, and Al Di Meola, were touring that record Friday night in San Francisco, and it was huge all over the world. I mean, that record just exploded. And they're playing at Town Hall in Sydney. And I was already a fan of Steve Morse, and I bought his, no, I hadn't bought it yet. No, that's part of the story. And I knew he had instruction tapes and books and all this sort of stuff. And I went to see that concert at Town Hall in Sydney. And unbeknownst to me, Steve Morse was the opening act.
Holy crap.
So for a while there, the trio, and they had Steve Morse opening on solo classical guitar. And then he sat in with them on a few things. So that was the four of them.
Wow.
There's one or two videos on YouTube of him playing with those guys,
Amazing.
Yeah. So I was like, oh my God, they're like, Steve Morse is here too. I was in guitar heaven, and, after the concert, me and my friends just hung out and sort of milled around, and we somehow managed to go backstage to like a meet and greet. I guess they weren't, maybe they weren't like, rabid fans that were going to cause a problem. They just were like, oh, there's some kids, then let them come back. So we came back and we're just hanging out at the meet and greet, and Steve shows up. I think the other guys didn't show up. And I'm like, oh, it's so great to hear. I love your playing, and the concert was amazing. And I think they were maybe he was selling his instructional cassette and booklet. And I picked it up and I was like, oh, this is your instructional tape. He's like, yeah. I'm like, and I don't know what got over me, but it got into me, but I just went, oh, is it any good? I don't know. It was like I was trying to think of something to say, or I was trying to be funny, or I don't know. I was being an idiot. I was a young idiot.
Kid, yeah.
And I'm a kid, and I'm like, isn't it any good? And he looks at me, and goes, no, it's a fucking piece of shit. What do you think? Of course it's good. And I was like, wow, I was just rude to one of my heroes. Well done.
Wow, that's funny, man.
Anyway, I bought it.
Was it any good?
It was definitely any good. It had some technique exercises that I'd still, couldn't play at the tempos that he plays them at. It's just, I've been recently studying again Too Many Notes. That's like a real technical cross-picking challenge, you know. I'm like, man, maybe I can tackle this now, you know, and get it up to tempo, and that's a whole cross-picking, that's a whole, you know, guitar technique that we could talk about, but it's fucking hard. Let's just say to play that is not that many people can really play that.
No, I don't think anybody not like him.
Not like him. Anyway,
man, it's a good segue. Let's talk about gear for a few minutes. I've been looking at that 335. Everybody else's 335 always looks better than your own 335. I don't know why. Like I'm always looking at, like people always say, "Oh, I like your 335," and I was like, "No, that 335 always looks better than my 335." What like what's your go-to guitar right now? And what other?
You know, the funny thing is, it's a 339.
Oh, it's a 339.
It's
okay,
smaller.
A little smaller.
Smaller, yeah.
The cherry is really dark. That's what I like about that.
Yeah, it's a cool guitar. In fact, you know, people can't see. I'm holding it up to the camera so you can see it.
Yeah.
I own a 3.3. You know, it's Gibson Custom Shop for a start. So these are really well made. I own a Gibson 339 and the 336 as well.
What is a 336?
And a 335.
What's a 336? This is the most brilliant marketing ploy ever. You know that, like,
yeah, right.
We have a 345, a 330, a 357, a 325, and a 336.
Yeah. The 339 and the 336 are the same body size, so they're scaled down from a 335. The 336 has a mahogany back that's been carved out, like routed out to make the hollow chamber, like solid mahogany but routed out, and then a maple cap. And then the 339 is built the way a 335 is, which is the back and the front are maple plywood, actually ply, not solid. And then down the middle is a maple sustain block or center block. And it's all glued to, you know, on the maple sides, it's all glued together. So I guess the idea with the 336 is that it's maybe, you know, a better tone or something because it's solid mahogany that's been routed out. But anyway, they're both great guitars, and I love the fact that it's a little smaller when you're playing it. It feels, if you close your eyes, it's almost like you're playing a Les Paul or something, but it's not as heavy.
These are big. They are big.
Yeah.
I'm only 5'9". I mean, I'm a broad, but I'm not. They're big guitars. I love it, but they're big guitars.
Yeah, it's weird. Like if you don't play 335 and then you pick one up, especially you play it with the strap standing up, you know, it feels like quite large. You know, I mean, obviously, if that's your axe, you get used to it and you love it. But
you look at a guy like one of my great heroes is Freddie King, and that guy was like just a massive human being, you know. And you look at him, right. It's like, fuck, that's small. You know, you look at Albert King with a flying V, it's like that doesn't look that big, and then you get him, it's like, whoa. So is that one of your top? Is that your number one?
Well, I got into, actually when I was playing with Chris Botti, I kind of got into the 335 thing and got a Gibson 335, and it's not like a vintage one or something. It's just a pretty nice, you know, newish one. And then it started to feel kind of heavy and big. Actually, the truth is, I had a bicycle accident. I broke my collarbone.
Oh,
and had
motorcycle or bike?
Bicycle.
Yeah. Riding in the city?
Yeah, riding in New
that
York.
sucks, man. That's
yeah, and I had surgery and I couldn't play and I missed some shows, and after that, it actually, the weight of an instrument on my left shoulder, so it's where the strap goes over, and I have titanium plate in there.
Wow.
It doesn't bother me really anymore. When I played gigs with Les Paul or, you know, heavier guitars and stuff now, but for a while there, I was like, this is the strap going over, you know, the weight of it, playing a long show standing, you know, the whole time. And so then I investigated the smaller ones, and they're lighter as well. And I got into the 336 and I actually really dug it. And then I saw this red 339 on Reverb, and it had a Bigsby on it and it had P90s. And I was like, yeah, this is cool. I'll get the one with the Bigsby and P90s. And I have one with humbuckers and one with Bigsby and P90s. Well, after a while, I took the Bigsby off. And then after a while, I replaced the P90s. Yeah, it didn't. Somehow that guitar with the P90s, it wasn't as bright as I thought it would. It kind of still sounded pretty similar to the humbuckers, but just humming, noise. So anyway, I put these Fralin big singles in there, which I like, and sort of a work in progress. But and I played a Strat for so many years. I'm such a Strat guy and love the feel of it, and the volume swells with your pinky and all the whammy bar things and the different pickup selections for different tones, and that was really my thing. But once I got back into playing Gibsons and humbuckers, I'm playing a Les Paul and I have an SG as well.
I love that guitar, man. The SG.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Which one is that you've got there? Is that the 61 reissue?
It's like a 2013 or 14, but it is a 61 reissue. Yeah. And I'm like I said, I'm not a big guy. The neck is just, it's literally the best neck of any guitar I own.
Yeah.
For my hands, it's just, it's got the 57s in there. It just sounds great. I love that guitar, man.
Yeah, they're really fun. When I picked up that, I was like, wow, this is a really fun axe. I really enjoy playing this.
Great to play for your shoulder, man. That thing is light as a freaking feather.
Yeah, it's a little weird. Like the neck, they can be neck heavy too.
It is.
You can slide it on the strap,
It is weird.
But my shoulder's fine now, and I think I have, I don't know, somewhere in this room I have something close to 50 stringed instruments, including a couple of mandolins, ukulele, mini guitar, lap steel, basses, different things. Not all of them are guitars, but majority of them are acoustics and electrics.
Your top three, would that be the 339 models or 335 genre?
Yeah, that red 339 has been my main guitar for a bit. And then I'm playing, I am switching back to the Strat more and more now, and I have a few different ones, a custom shop 56 reissue type of thing, with a maple board, which is, totally different, more bright and more fendery and snappy. And then acoustics, which I play a lot of acoustic.
Yeah, you do.
I have, especially on my record, it features acoustic more than electric. I have a Martin 0018 from 1948.
Oh, wow.
Which is a really nice guitar. When I got it, it hadn't been played much, so it's actually getting better every year. The more I play it, the more tone opens up, and it's just such a vibe, It doesn't have a pickup or anything. I don't take it out on live gigs. And then for acoustic, I have two different Maton, the Australian company that Tommy endorses and plays their guitars, Maton. They have great pickups, and they're fine guitars, but they really shine on stage. So I have two different models of Maton, a jumbo one and a dreadnought style, and they're just great workhorse guitars, recording and especially playing live with the band with a pickup on and all that.
It's interesting. Everybody outside of I shouldn't say everybody. Australians for sure, and English, which I know you guys hate to be put together, always refer to they always say the 335 or 33. They never say 335, 339.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing because my wife's from the UK. I told you so. I always the language is the same, but there's like just certain differences, and like that's one of them. You guys always. It's 335.
Well, let me ask you this. The Larry Carlton tune, Room 335?
Yeah.
Would you say Room 335?
No, I'd say Room 335.
Ah, I see. Because that's where, when I first got into Larry Carlton, like back in the 80s or whatever, and he had that tune, Room 335, and he was also known as Mr. 335.
Right.
So I was like, I think that's where that came from. But yeah, you're right. Maybe it's
yeah, it's the guys in the UK do the same thing.
It's not the only funny thing we say down.
Oh no, you guys are certainly a lot more eloquent than we are. So in no way am I saying it's not like
always.
You're doing it wrong and we're doing it right, but it's just really interesting. There's certain linguistic differences of just different words, like you guys sort of say take the piss out of somebody, and that's not like if you say, again, I know this because of Anne, but if you said that to a guy who hasn't, they'd be like, what is that? In what? they're just not in their vernacular, man.
Yeah, it sounds like a strange thing to do to someone.
Yeah, to take the piss out of them. What the hell are you talking about, man? Let's examine this
call,
relationship.
You know what they call a guitar cable that you plug into your amp with?
No.
They call it a lead.
Interesting.
Yeah, in England and Australia too. So you got a spare lead? So got a spare lead, mate. I got to plug in the amp.
Interesting.
Or in Australia, like, oh mate, my lead's broken. You got another lead?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's certain little colloquialisms that regionally, and hey, that's what makes us all different.
True.
Any players who influence your playing that people might be surprised to hear?
Well, yeah. I know what I've taken a sneak peek, shall we say, at some of your questions, and I've listened to some of your interviews. I know one thing you like to ask about is the Desert Island Discs and favorite players and stuff. When I think about it, I realize that a lot of the stuff I like to listen to is not necessarily music that I play much. For example, Paco de Lucia, the famous flamenco guitarist, was, in my opinion, the greatest living guitar player when he was alive, across any style. I mean, just the virtuoso of guitar, and in so many different ways, not just technically, and in passion and in emotion and command and all of that stuff. So when I listen to, it's one of my favorite players, and I have listened to him a lot over the years, but I don't play flamenco guitar. Right. I've dabbled a little bit, and I can kind of hint at it, and suggest it sometimes. And I did sort of check out some flamenco stuff and some online courses and things, but it's like,
were they any good?
Yeah, there's
no. I'm
yeah. Now they're a piece of shit. What do you think?
A fucking piece of shit, man. Of course it's fucking good.
Yeah, sign up for my class. It's a piece of shit. Sorry, Steve. Oh my God, it's so embarrassing. I've got a few of those. Hey, you meet someone, you get tongue tied, or you say the wrong thing, or you just blew it out something, and you're like, "Why did I say that?" Oh, idiot.
Who doesn't?
Yeah. Anyway, so Paco de Lucia, because I don't really play flamenco music, but is a huge influence, and yeah, that would be one for sure.
Who you listen to now that you like, guitar wise?
Good question. Recently, I'm always looking for new music, and when somebody's like, "Oh, you should check out this and check out that," it's great when you find something you like that you haven't heard before. Recently, I got that Bill Frisell album, Music Is. I've always liked Bill Frisell, but this record is cool. He does a lot of looping and stuff on there, and my girlfriend and I like to put that on when we do yoga at home.
Look at you, Mr. Domestic. You're in Brooklyn, not LA, man. What the hell?
No, I'm in Queens, man. Queens is the new
Where
Brooklyn.
In Queens do you live?
In Sunnyside or Woodside. I'm like right on the cusp of Sunnyside and Woodside. Looking out my window right here, I can see right across the trees. I can see Manhattan, the Manhattan skyline.
That's always been a nice area.
It is it's quiet and residential and family oriented, and Brooklyn just got crazy. I love Brooklyn, but anyway, yeah, I really like that record. I mean, a lot of times, I check out players. I check out guitar music sometimes just because I'm just enamored with great players, and I want to hear their great playing. And even if they're in a totally different style from me or whatever. But then there's music that I put on that I just actually like to have on and listen to, and not sit there and have my mind engaged by something, guitaristic, but just like experience the music like a non-musician, like a normal person,
without analyzing it. Yeah.
I really like that record. I listened to your Chris Eldridge interview and also the Brian Sutton interview, but that record, Chris Eldridge and
Julian Lage.
Julian Lage. Julian Lage is a player that I was aware of I think some years ago, but, more and more recently, I'm just like, wow, he's just such a great musician. And I got to meet him actually one night in Tokyo after a show, and we went to see his show, and we all hung out in a bar afterwards. And I got to talk guitars with him and drink some whiskey and stuff.
That's
I think
cool,
he had
man.
tea. Maybe he had tea, but yeah, he's such a sweet guy, such a great player, and I really like that record of what's it called, Boneyard something, or that's one of the tunes.
I'm embarrassed. I can't think of the name of it right now, but
right.
Let's look it up.
Anyway, it's the latest record from. It's a duo record of two acoustic guitars, Julian Lage and Chris Eldridge. I really like that.
It's called Mount Royal.
Mount Royal, yes.
And Chris, all those bluegrass guys, I've interviewed a bunch of them. Another guy in the city, I don't know if you know him or not. Do you know Grant Gordy?
Not really.
He's a really nice guy. All these bluegrass guys are like really incredibly open. Not that anybody listening that non-bluegrasses aren't, but they're really like, I think it's a very communal type of music. And so they're all like very down with, being, I don't know, just, and it's a genre I have not been familiar with. So I've gotten, I've learned a lot of new music, which is really cool. And I had never, I had a very conventional, ignorant upbringing in the Bronx. Like, anything south of New Jersey, they must be hillbilly. They're related to people, it's just the way you're raised in New York. We're a very ethnocentric, place to grow up. And then when you get out and you realize none of this is true at all. Like literally nothing. I was even trying to figure this out. They're like, why is that the perception? Like, how does that even evolve? Because it's like so far from the truth, I mean, I've been living in the South since '89, but, yeah, it's just a great community, but Grant's another good guy in the city to check out.
Yeah. There's, I think acoustic music in general, I mean, there's certainly a resurgence of it with, younger musicians and younger people, and like I think maybe Brian Sutton said in his interview or something like that about like Brooklyn and how many great like bluegrass players, stuff that something you wouldn't expect when you think of Brooklyn, how much acoustic music there is. And I love, don't get me wrong, I love, AC/DC Back in Black, and it's one of the greatest rock records, but I love, I just find myself gravitating more towards acoustic music to play at home. I pick up an acoustic guitar all the time and listen to as well. And sometimes it's, it could be bluegrass or it could be flamenco, or it could be West African music or something, which I like a lot too. And it also could be not the guitar, it could be other acoustic instruments. But actually, another record that I really like is, or artist I really like, is Tumani Jabate, speaking of West African music, who plays the kora, which is an African harp, for want of a better description. And that's a record. His record, the Mande Variations. He's got a few albums, and he's collaborated with a lot of other people too. But and I think his son apparently is really great also. But that album to me is just one of those timeless records I can put on and just have on, at home, or when I'm traveling, or when I'm chilling out at night, or when I'm trying to go to sleep or something. It's just like it's beautiful music, and it's very real, and it's just acoustic music recorded solo, and there's something about it that doesn't relate to playing a Strat or something, but it can relate to playing it can relate to guitar, but it's sort of a cousin of the guitar.
Two things I wanted to ask you. You mentioned AC/DC. Because they're from Australia, are they like revered there?
Yeah. Interesting. AC/DC, there are a lot of, famous Australian bands. AC/DC, obviously everyone knows Men at Work, In Excess. The Bee Gees actually grew up there.
Yeah.
Olivia Newton-John, Midnight Oil. AC/DC, I mean, yeah, growing up, that Back in Black record or other AC/DC. I mean, I remember being a little kid and seeing them we had this TV show called Countdown, which was like every week a different artist would come on, and they would actually, most of it was miming, sadly, but they would mime, lip sync to their own hit record every week. And, AC/DC would come on, and Angus, dressed like a schoolboy and all that. And I was really into it. But yeah, I mean, an Australian pub, I mean, you go in there, you're just always going to hear You Shook Me All Night Long on the jukebox and all that. But I think they basically moved to the UK a long time. I mean, they probably all have houses in Sydney and elsewhere, and maybe New Zealand. I think one that got arrested was in New Zealand. But they kind of became an international act, and everyone knows they're Australian, but they're also like an international act. I don't know. Whereas there are Australian bands like Cold Chisel that I grew up loving, and just amazing guitar player Ian Moss, one of my favorite rock guitar players, that you're not going to know about unless you an Australian, or unless a couple of my friends who are like good friends of mine and so hip with the Aussie thing that they know about Cold Chisel. But no one, they never broke it overseas. There were so many bands like that.
Do you know this band Kavas Jute?
No,
they're an Australian band. You've got to check them out. Khavas Jute. I think I'm going to just look them up real quick on my iTunes, which I know that's like dinosaur now, having iTunes, but KHA, I think it is. Kavas, here goes K. It's K-A-H, K-A-H-V-A-S, Jute. It's an old record, man. It's like, I think I'm a little older than you. This is from 72, but I only heard about it, man, like about 10 or 12 years ago. I was driving to
They're from Australia?
Yeah.
Wow.
K-A-H-V-A-S, Jute, and the name of the record is called Wide Open. And there's some great songs on there. But the reason there's the best song is called Parade of Fools. It's like a 2-minute song. But I was driving to a concert, funny enough, one night with my son, and we were listening to one of the college radio stations or something, and like, shit, man, this is great. What the hell is it? And I'm always, probably everybody listening to this is no different. You write down and you hear good music, and then you say, oh, let me check this out as soon as I can. And it was a great record. Yeah.
Cool.
But again, it's older, from the 70s, if you like that stuff.
Yeah.
The other thing you said, I wanted to ask you, and I'm having a brain fart about, I can't remember. We'll pick it up. Man, what's a typical day for you now?
Well, I've kind of settled in lately into a not being on tour kind of lifestyle.
And you keep mentioning your girlfriend, so you're like all domesticated and shit.
Well, that's right. When you're not on tour all the time, maybe you can, get a nice girl or something.
Good for you, man.
Yeah. So, and of course, I like touring. Touring is great, but when you do too much of it, after a while, you just you yearn for having a home life and having sleeping in your own bed and working on your own stuff during the day, and having cooking and stuff like that you can do when you're not out eating at restaurants on the road and stuff. Anyway, so yeah, lately it's been typical day. Let's get up, have that real strong cup of coffee, go to the gym or do yoga, or in the summertime go swimming or something, and then at some point in the day, it's always in my mind, I'm going to practice at some point. But it might be the first thing I do, or it might be after. Now I've got like a rehearsal, for example, in town for an upcoming gig, or I get called for a session for a jingle or something. Still happens occasionally, or a record or something.
You do those at home, or do you go to? Yeah, you got a good studio.
And so. Right, I might go into town. When I say into town, I'm in Queens. It's all of 2 miles into
town.
Go and do a session somewhere, a rehearsal, or have something on my computer hard drive that I'm supposed to play guitar on, a song that someone has sent me, or maybe a commercial spot. Something might need to be turned around really quickly, or something that's been sitting there for a while, and I've got to do a whole guitar treatment on. And sit and record, and then at night, I'm playing on a Broadway show, Mean Girls, written by Tina Fey, and so if that's that's a 8-show week schedule, if you choose to do all 8 shows, which part of the thing of having a Broadway show is you don't have to do all 8 shows. You can do, as long as you do 50% of the shows, you've still got the gig. So you can sub it out for other projects or whatever. But, you know, that's also a nice, it's sort of the musician's day job, except that it's at night. You know, you've got this show you go to and you show up and see your friends and play the show and get on the train and go home, you know. So
that's a nice predictable thing though. And as a musician, I would imagine, you know, it's nice getting on a train and going back home. You're not getting on an airplane and, you know, being herded like cattle through fucking airport.
Yeah, well, you know, when you're on the road, it's like people say you're not being paid to play a show, you're being paid to travel,
right?
Because that's what you're doing most of the time, you know. So yeah, the Broadway thing is something that I didn't pursue, but it kind of came to me with Spider-Man, which was a music work by Bono and Edge from U2. They wrote the music for it, and that was back in 2010 or 11. That was my first Broadway show. But once I did that show, I mean, I was super excited to, oh wow, I'm going to get to work with these guys. I've always been a fan of U2 as well. But I realized, wow, this is actually kind of a good deal. I've got this steady income from this show, but I've got all this flexibility. And I went on the road with George Michael for 3 or 4 months at a time, came back, still had the gig. Remember I was telling the story about, you know, being a kid going on the road and coming back and having nothing going on. You know, it's like you can come back from the road, you could literally play a show the very next day and be back in your chair, you know.
That's great.
So, so for a lot of New York musicians, it's kind of, you know, I mean, it's become a thing to, you know, to want to have that set up. And I understand for a lot of people, they still kind of think, oh, Broadway show, that's, you know, that's not why I got into music. I want to be a rock star. I want to be on stage and I want to be doing creative music or improvising. And
I don't think a lot of people are thinking that now. There's not a lot of rock star gigs, and, you know, and I've talked to 400 people. Most of them have not been rock stars, man. You know,
well, that's true. There, you know, that kind of. I mean, it's great if you can get it.
Yeah.
But also, you know, like one of the things I say to people about being a musician is that, you know, knowing you want to be a musician is like you just something you just know you're going to be a musician. But what this next step is figuring out how to make a life in music. You know, that includes being flexible and you know, adapting with changing times, adapting with as you change and your lifestyle changes and as you get older and everything else. And there's all these different things that come into play. And if you're going to be a musician your entire career, your entire working life, you can't just hold on to one single idea of what that's going to mean, you know?
Man, this is a fun question. Favorite New York City food, and is there any Australian food that you miss?
Yeah, well, so I'm kind of a little obsessed now with Xi'an Famous Foods. It's more of this spicy Chinese
Xian?
Yes.
Dude,
Xi'an Famous Foods.
Okay, hold on a minute. You must.
Am I like not the first person?
No. Who just told me this the other? Oh, it was. Let me look here. He doesn't live there anymore. It was, you know, Rich Hinman?
Yeah.
Rich, he was telling me he misses
Xi'an.
Yeah, he misses that because he's in California. I said, man, what? I know you got to miss some New York foods. And that's what he told me.
Yeah.
So I did what you told me you did before we got on the interview. I wrote that place down. So next time I'm in the city, I'm going to make sure I check that place out.
It's great. I mean, it's a chain now too. There's a bunch of locations.
Very cool.
But it did start. I think it started in Flushing, Queens, and now that I'm living in Queens, I have been out to Flushing to some of those little dumpling places and stuff, and they're incredible. And they're so cheap, you know, and no one speaks English, and it's really authentic. But Xi'an Famous Foods, they got it down, and it's like this spicy, tingly beef noodle thing. And it's killer. And you know, it's like counter style, like you're in and out of there pretty quick. It's not really a restaurant. It's more of a takeout thing, but you can sit down and eat there, and yeah, it's great.
Very cool, man.
Australia. So there's a lot of Australian places in New York now, cafes, restaurants. And,
what is Australian food? I didn't even know. Like lamb? I mean, that's really ignorant. I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, when growing up and before my time, Australia, it was like your meat and potatoes, like great lamb and beef, fish or whatever, but kind of English style cooking or old school diet, not very healthy, blah blah blah. But over the years, it's morphed so much, and there's like the Southeast Asian influence and emphasis on freshness and fresh ingredients and creative. And now the Australian food scene is amazing. There's just really great restaurants in Australia, and in Sydney, it's probably especially the seafood, and the oysters and all that stuff. But the other thing is Australia now has some of the best coffee in the world.
Really?
The coffee scene in Australia now, across the board, it's hard to find bad coffee. Like really good espressos and flat whites and, all the what they call specialty coffee here, or, since Starbucks brought that in. But, all that stuff, but done really, really well. Like, compared to Italy or anywhere, I mean, it's really, really good.
You know what? I interviewed, it's funny you say that, Frank Sidoris, who is Slash's guitar player, maybe a year ago. And his thing is he loves coffee. So he keeps a little, somewhere in his iPhone of every time he goes to a great coffee place. And I asked him, I said, where's the best coffee? He said, Australia.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
a lot of people say that now.
What coffee do you like in the States here? Or like, do you order coffee from somewhere, or, cause I order a bunch of coffee from all over.
Oh, you mean like to get the beans or whatever? I mean,
just to drink at home. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have like 6 or 7 different ways to make coffee at home, but now the espresso machine and the French press and everything. I mean, my go-to actually is Illy. You get it.
Yeah, that's great.
Ground or not ground.
Great stuff.
And when I'm out and about, if I go past, like if there's La Colombe or if there's somewhere that has some of the boutique or Blue Bottle or one of those places, if I'm walking by, I'll go in and buy a bag,
right?
And grind it at home and stuff.
Man, it's a good place. If you ever seen them down, they've been around over 100 years. There's a place called Puerto Rico, Porto Rico.
Oh yeah, where's that?
There's one in the East. The one I always go to is on Bleecker. It's right, just
coffee place on Bleecker with all the beans and
right. Right. It's like on the north side of the street, like a couple of blocks off 6th Avenue. But man, it's really funny because when I was a kid, I hung out in the Village every weekend. I walked by the place 100 times. And then one day when I was with my wife, God, it's 25 years ago, probably we're in New York. And I said, man, I never had coffee here. Let's go. Cause we both love coffee. Man, we've been buying coffee there since. It's really good. I mean, it's not the best coffee, but like it's the best valued coffee because you're paying like, this is a weird conversation we're having. Like we're paying not $18 for a pound. You're paying like $10 for a pound of coffee, which is pretty cheap, and it's really good beans, man. So anybody listen, go to order Puerto Rico, Porto Rico. All right. Talk about a specific experience that changed your life or altered the way you think about things.
That's a hard one, man. There's just so, I don't know, many experiences throughout life and different periods of life. I'll share, what I was thinking about in advance of doing this podcast. I was thinking about one experience that, that might go to, more like childhood things and stuff like that. But, I remember, when I was just starting to play electric guitar and, I was in the high school I went to, they had a high school musical and I got asked to, be one of the guitar players in the band of the high school musical. And we rehearsed this music and I can't even remember what it was like but what I do remember is that when we did the performance, one of the songs, there was a guitar solo in it. And the teacher / music director or whatever was like, man, I want you to play a guitar solo here on this song. I'm like, okay, what, and I was getting around a little bit on some rock stuff and, but we did the performance, and then it got to that bit, and I must have turned my amp up or something and got a sound, you know, and played a solo in that. And the weirdest thing happened. I felt like almost like I was being struck by lightning or something. I mean, I literally felt
that good.
I felt like electricity in my body. Maybe I was being electrocuted from the amp. I just realized that. Maybe it wasn't a metaphysical experience.
It wasn't a spiritual experience.
But I just felt I felt this thing just happen to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like it happened from outside of me, not just like, oh, now I'm playing guitar, you know, now I'm doing a solo. But I felt like this thing came and grabbed me, you know, like this energy that happened to me during that I was not expecting, didn't know what it was, you know. And I guess maybe it's just the feeling, like the rush of a performance or something that, you know, happened again throughout my life at various, sometimes more obviously and sometimes really not. But, you know, that thing of like somehow when you're doing a performance and it's a rush, you know, it's an energy. But it really struck me because I'm like, wow, I don't know whatever that feeling was, but I want to do it again, you know. I wanted to, like, it was something that didn't happen playing at home. It wasn't just playing the instrument. It was something that happened performing in front of people and, you know, getting a moment and yeah.
That's
probably made me want to be a musician, I guess, maybe.
That's fantastic.
I was already into music, but that experience was like, well, I don't know what that was, but I want that again, you know.
And have you had that? You said you've had it.
Sure. I mean, not every time I play or whatever, but I mean, it's some kind of, you know, it's some kind of a rush of a live performance thing that can happen in the right conditions. And the older you get, the more, you know, performances experience you have and stuff. Maybe it's less about that rush and it's more about, you know, delivering a very, you know, competent, good performance or something, but not necessarily always having that amazing feeling about it. But it can happen and does happen.
What a great thing to experience, man. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Regrets. You have any regrets for stuff that maybe you didn't do?
Sure, I have plenty of regrets. I could talk for another 2 hours about regrets, but you know, I think regret is just the less time you dwell on regrets, the better for your own health, you know, and your mental health. We all have things we might have done differently, or you know, in hindsight, you can say, well, if I'd done this or approached this, or if this had happened to me then, things would be different now. But you know, you're living life. You're living the life that you're living. You can't wish it was something else, you know.
Yeah, one of my closest friends told me one time, he said, Craig, don't ever look in the rear view mirror. There's nothing to be gained from that.
Yeah.
And I've always held that. That was great advice. And man, last question, and I cannot thank you enough I really enjoyed this and I was glad we got to connect, man. Biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years, and how much of that change has been deliberate and intentional, and how much is just a natural part of aging?
I don't think I've changed that much. I think, you know, I'm maturing, hopefully. And hopefully, not always. But, you know, I think for me, part of, you know, getting older and having more experience, I guess that certainly I'm much more organized, have my shit together more in business and finances and sort of lifestyle. Maybe it's that I think I've gotten a lot better at realizing that you know, the short-term gratification versus long-term gratification equation. You know, there's a lot of things that you just don't feel like doing, or you don't feel like doing right now, but you should, and you're going to be grateful to yourself that you did. You know, they're not always fun and not always interesting, and you know, it's but your life will be better if you know the things that you need to take care of, you do take care of.
Man, that is really, really true and really good advice.
Oh, cool.
That is really good. And I'll tell you what, for me, the thing that I've been doing a long time, and I never knew how valuable it would be until now, because I just turned 55 early this month, is exercising, man. I've been working out in the gym since I'm like 23. And, it started off like vanity, like every other young guy goes to the gym, you want big muscles. Sure. And I'm so grateful I did that now, because I see other people my age and it's like scary.
Yeah, well, absolutely. That's one of those things that so many times, I don't really feel like going to the gym or doing this or doing that. But, you've got to maintain yourself in many ways. Physically is an important one, mentally. And if you just don't do those things, you will pay the price for sure.
Totally. And, I read articles on health and stuff all the time, and they're always talking about how exercise is the best medicine for anything. That, I remember I had a knee problem a few years back, and I've always had bad knees. I went to the doctor and I said, man, this is killing me, because you ought to see the people that don't exercise, how pain there. And I'm like, really?
Oh yeah, sure.
So I quickly stopped bitching about that. So. Man, I can't thank you enough for your time. Let me tell everybody where they could find you. And honestly, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been really, really fun. Thank you.
Likewise. First of all, it's Ben Butler. Please check him out online. He's got a great website. It's Ben Butler. What is it? Ben Butler Guitarist, right? No, Ben Butler Music.
Yes,
right?
benbutlermusic.com is the website. Yeah.
Right. It's benbutlermusic.com. And also check out his album that came out. It's called Truth in Guitars. It's on Amazon, iTunes, and CD Baby. And I think he's working on another album to release next year.
Yes, hopefully, yeah.
Awesome. And hopefully he'll come on the show, and we'll have a little 30-minute bonus show to talk about it. He is available for the following. And like, he's going to turn green because he doesn't like to promote himself, but I don't feel good unless I'm promoting these guys. Okay, so if you're looking for any kind of tracks for jingles or obviously licensing for movies, he's a very sharp guy. Also, go to his Facebook, which is Ben Butler Guitarist, and his YouTube. Man, he's got some, like I said in the very beginning, he's got some phenomenal, beautiful acoustic guitar stuff on his YouTube channel. He also has this, and he also does lessons. And if you're interested in connecting with Ben on lessons, go to his Facebook page, Ben Butler Guitarist, and you can connect with him there. And, just maybe give him a little background about what you're looking to accomplish. And, you probably, I guess, should be maybe intermediate level and up. And if you're looking to accomplish specific things, or have a third party give you some guidance and get some objective opinion on, something you might be struggling with and how to get around it, he's a good guy for that. On YouTube, he's got something that's real popular. He has, and I'm going to let him talk about it because I am a complete idiot with respect to this stuff, is he's got a Bach cello suite. Am I correct?
Yeah. I did an arrangement of the very famous Bach cello suite, the Prelude in G, that as soon as you hear it, even if you don't know classical music, you'll go, oh yeah, I know this one. And I did an arrangement for it on steel string guitar, tuned down to C, because it's originally written for cello, so it's tuned lower, and but an alternate tuning. And it's something I just did for my own enjoyment. I put it on YouTube, and I got so much interest in it. So I did up a professional transcription with tablature and everything. And all the time I'm getting people buying that. They really like this version of this tune. And anyway, that transcription is also for sale. If you watch the video of the Bach cello suite, it comes up, the link in there comes up. It also is on my Facebook on Ben Butler Guitarist. You'll see the link to buy the transcription.
Great. Thank you. That was very well done. So check out the Bach cello suite and buy the transcription from Ben on his Facebook page, Ben Butler Guitarist, or at the end of the YouTube video. Man, anything I've missed? Any other final words of wisdom?
Oh, we've covered so much, man. It's been really, really fun.
Thank you.
There's always more wisdom. So if you pick up any, just email it to me or text it to me.
I'll be emailing you an encyclopedia, believe me, because I pick up some every day. Hey man, thank you.
Well, I will say one thing actually that I heard Chick Corea say after a concert, that someone was like, Mr. Corea, do you have any advice for aspiring piano players? Blah blah blah. And he said, the music that you like, play that. And I was like, that's what he's going to say? He's like, yeah, whatever it is that you like, that's the music you should play, you know? Because so much we get caught up in, I need to learn this, I need to learn that, I should check this out and that out, and I should learn, whatever, study this before I can get to this, I need to study this. And that might be true in a certain extent, but, the only reason to play music is because you enjoy it. So you should play the music that you enjoy. You should listen to music you enjoy. You should figure out how to play it, get lessons, whatever you need. And that's the best advice.
Dude, I think that was wonderful. You had 2 brilliant moments here, Ben. In the last 5 minutes, even. Shit.
My God.
We got to package this, brother.
I need a break.
Hey, man, thank you for everything.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Craig.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, please share it with a friend on your social media channels. We definitely appreciate your support. Thanks again to Ben Butler for spending time with us. I really appreciate it. Please check him out online. It's benbutlermusic.com, Ben Butler Guitarist on Facebook, and definitely check out his YouTube channel. It's got some beautiful stuff there. Make sure you go to everyonelovesguitar.com, sign up to get on our newsletter list so you and I can connect. And most important, remember that happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have fun. Till next time, thanks for listening. Peace and love, everybody. I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.